Clair Obscur Expedition 33 has been doing phenomenally. It's sold millions of copies, and I'm sure that there's millions of more players who are playing it via Game Pass, and the developers are so grateful for our support. They have constantly been updating us about their plans for the future and how excited the team is. But one company that I don't think is particularly happy right now is Square Enix, because they decided to abandon turn-based when it comes to Final Fantasy, and well, a lot of people are now saying this is the direction they should be going in, and an analyst is even saying that Square Enix is probably kicking themselves right now. I have a few different things to show off, but before I get into the topic, if you enjoy the content I create, check out the links in the description, join the community in my live streams, and consider supporting through Patreon or YouTube memberships. Now, when it comes to Square Enix, they're a company that puts out a lot of different content, and they have a lot of different games, and it's not like they have abandoned turn-based completely, but they have in terms of Final Fantasy, and this was a controversial decision when they made it several years ago, and now there are analysts who are saying they're probably kicking themselves for this decision. So it says Final Fantasy fans have been begging for the series to return to its turn-based roots for years, and according to analysts, the success of Clair Obscur probably has Squeenix feeling some regret over not catering to that niche sooner. A big reason why Final Fantasy became popular was because of course, the world building and the stories and the characters, but also because of the combat. Turn-based made them successful, made this series successful, and it is mind-boggling that they decided, no, we want to modernize this series so much that it's going to become unrecognizable. And don't get me wrong, I love games like Final Fantasy 16. I think it is fantastic. I love some of the performances. The story is heart-wrenching. It's a very good game in my opinion, but I still would rather see them do turn-based with Final Fantasy. It's like how a lot of Japanese companies now are deciding to cater to global audiences, and of course that means sensitive snowflakes on social media, and so they tone their work down and they change it so much that it becomes unrecognizable, and that's something that has happened to Final Fantasy in my and many other people's opinions. But it says the biggest factors in Expedition 33's success are its lovable characters, great combat, and relatively low $50 price tag, as Reese Elliott of Elena Analytics tells GamesIndustry.biz, but he adds that there was also an opening for a modern, realistic-looking JRPG with a traditional battle system. Now, of course, Expedition 33 is made by French developers, but it is heavily inspired by turn-based JRPGs. They have said this multiple times, and I do think that they actually really nailed that feeling and that atmosphere, and this game is just fantastic. I've been live streaming it. I'm almost done my live stream playthrough, and I am heartbroken with some of the decisions that happen with the game, some of the character decisions, but I'm also absolutely loving it. The world feels so rich and alive. It is a phenomenal game in my opinion, and I do think that a $50 price tag has really helped it along, but I also think Game Pass has helped it too. Now, I'm somebody who has Game Pass and I play games via Game Pass, but if I like it, I will monetarily support the developers and play a game and purchase it separately, and I think that is, part of the reason why it's so successful. A lot of people are playing it that way, giving it a chance, saying, wow, this is like really fantastic, and then they buy another copy, and of course we know that physical copies are sold out worldwide because the developers didn't even expect it to do this good, which is always great to hear. But I want to obviously point out that it's not like this is the first turn-based game we've gotten in, decades. There's Baldur's Gate 3, Dragon Quest, Persona 3 Remake, Metaphor. I mean, it's not like we have gotten no turn-based games, but this one just does everything exceptionally well, and it's very clear that for a AA studio, they have a lot of success on their hands, and they really know how to capture the audience that they were marketing this game towards, and I think that Square Enix maybe could go back to that. They could end up selling, the copies that they need per game, because the past couple of titles they've launched, they've said that they've underperformed, so they clearly need to do a 180 and really look back at their roots and what made them successful in the first place. I know their games do sell millions and millions of copies each, but they have said all of their recent games have underperformed, which obviously isn't what a company wants. Now, this article is from 2023, but it talks about how Square Enix had lost nearly $2 billion in value since the launch of Final Fantasy XVI in June, and a new report has cast doubt on the company's ability to recover. And this is an article from 2024 that talks about how the PlayStation 5 exclusives, Final Fantasy XVI, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and Foam Stars had all failed to meet internal expectations, and additionally, they were making layoffs affecting US and European staff, including the Square Enix Collective indie label. So we're just talking about flop after flop and underperformance after underperformance. But headed back to the initial article, it talks about how Square Enix was reticent to do it with the Final Fantasy series. Elliot continues, now it's probably kicking itself. Expedition 33 has given RPG fans something they've always wanted. If you ask Final Fantasy fans from the late 90s, early 2000s, what the ideal version of a JRPG should look like, it would be something like this. And back in 2022, the Final Fantasy XVI producer, Yoshida, had told Games Radar that he understood the appeal of turn-based combat. After all, he came up alongside that style of gameplay just as series fans did, but he equally seemed to believe that action-based battles were a far better fit for games with realistic graphics. One thing that we found recently is that as graphics get better and better and as characters become more realistic and more photoreal, it is that the combination of that realism with the very unusual sense of turn-based commands doesn't really fit together, but Expedition 33 does it phenomenally. Now, I understand it is not a traditional turn-based game. You do have some action mechanics in there, right? Like dodges and parrying. There's lots of QTEs, but ultimately, if you want, you can go into the settings and you can just have it auto-complete the parries and dodges and things like that, so you can play it a bit more traditionally, I would say. But yeah, I mean, those things do matter, but the way that they have, I suppose we'll just say, like, used an evolved formula of turn-based is really good, and it does feel very action-packed. So I think that this is the direction that Square Enix needs to go. I think that this is the direction that Final Fantasy needs to go in specifically. And again, it's not like Square Enix has completely abandoned turn-based, but we're talking about in terms of Final Fantasy, and I definitely think that over the next couple of years, we could see a major shift with them. When you have games that are coming out and they're underperforming time and time and time again, and then you see other companies doing something massively successful that you yourself once did, yeah, it must be a very major shock to them, maybe even a wake-up call. Now, we have heard some rumors and reports that the next Final Fantasy game that they want to make, which is the continuation, whether that is going to be like a Final Fantasy 17 or they want to start another kind of Final Fantasy spin-off set of games, that they were considering that because of the success of games like Baldur's Gate 3 and of course the remakes and remasters that have come out, and even titles like Metaphor, that they wanted to go back to that because they saw kind of the success. And I think that maybe Clair Obscur Expedition 33 could push them even further towards that, and I hope that that happens. I want them to make really good games. And again, I like Final Fantasy 16, but ultimately the combat in something like Clair Obscur feels much more Final Fantasy than even what Square Enix has been creating over the past few years. So we'll have to see. Will the industry magically wake up to turn-based? I'm not necessarily sure, but I do think that there is a chance that we could see a lot more companies seeing this success and deciding to try to ride the wave themselves. I mean, look at the way that the industry shifts every couple of years. We are just going from battle royales being kind of phased out in the development cycle to extraction shooters being developed, such as Arc Raiders and Marathon. I think that maybe even turn-based could be a next big trend in the industry. Only time will tell, but even analysts are now saying that they believe Square Enix is probably kicking themselves after seeing the success of realistic turn-based JRPG Expedition 33. And they're even saying that, well, this is really what Final Fantasy fans want. But that's all that I really had to discuss in this video. Let everyone know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this, give it a like, and if you didn't, give it a dislike. I appreciate your support either way, but I'll talk to you all again in the next video really soon.